just barely made it in because we didn't have enough money to get through the toll booth.
It was that bad.
It was that bad.
What really happened behind the scenes with the Commodores? This legendary group gave us timeless hits like Easy and Brick House. But what secrets were they keeping? Recently, the band members revealed something that fans have suspected for years. What did they confirm? And how does it change the story we thought we knew? Let's dive into the truth about the Commodores. In the late 70s and early 80s, the Commodores were one of the biggest soul bands in the world. But before all the fame, they were just a group of college friends trying to make music.
Motown legends, the Commodores, they dominated the charts in the 1970s. You probably remember them with their massive hits like Brick House, Easy, 3 Times a Lady.
It all started at Tuskegee University in Alabama. 2 student groups, the Mystics and the Jays, came together to form the band. Lionel Richie, Thomas McClary, and William King were part of the Mystics. The Jays included Andre Callahan, Michael Gilbert, and Milan Williams.
None of it would have happened if a young man named Thomas McClary hadn't overheard someone whistling while waiting in line at a university in America's South. That someone was Lionel Richie.
Thomas McClary shared how he met Lionel Richie in an interview. He was standing in the registration line at Tuskegee when he heard someone behind him whistling a jazz tune. Thomas turned around and asked, "Are you a musician?" The shy young man replied, "No, not really." That young man was Lionel Richie. Thomas explained he was forming a band for the freshman talent show and needed musicians. Lionel said he lived nearby and could gather some guys for an audition at his grandmother's house.
Well, actually, I was amazed at the fact that he was so innocent, and we were just a freshman, both of us, and I was set on trying to find some guys, to put a band together because I wanted to meet some girls.
When Thomas showed up at Lionel's grandmother's house, he was surprised to see Lionel coming down the stairs playing a saxophone. Thomas laughed and said, "I thought you weren't a musician." Lionel humbly replied, "I play a little bit." Thomas knew Lionel was a perfect fit for the band.
Our lead singer had gotten drafted to the Vietnam War, and we needed a substitute, I said, "Hey, man, you sound great." "What do you mean?" "I sound great." "Yes, you do." So
he didn't even realize that he had that gift.
No, he didn't. Huh. Very innocent guy.
Yeah.
Just,
The group performed at the talent show and won. They didn't own any equipment, so they borrowed from the Jays. Later, when some members of the Jays graduated, the 2 groups merged. Now they had talent and equipment, but they needed a new name. William King came up with Commodores by accident. He randomly opened a dictionary, ran his finger down the page, and landed on the word. He joked that they were lucky. If his finger had landed on commodes, things might have been very different. From those simple beginnings, the Commodores went on to become legends, but they never forgot where it all started, at a little college in Alabama.
You were, one of the defining sounds of a sort of funk vibe.
Well, we wanted to set a new trajectory for music.
Many people don't know how hard some bands work to get their big break. Thomas McClary recently shared a story about how he and his bandmates went through some tough times before they made it. Back in the day, they would drive all night just to get to New York, hoping for a chance to perform. But before any of that could happen, they had to convince Lionel Richie's grandmother to let Lionel go with them. Lionel had a job lined up at a bomb factory in Joliet, Illinois, and his grandmother was worried about him traveling. She didn't want him to get into trouble, so the group made her a promise. They said they wouldn't mess with drugs or alcohol. After playing a few small gigs, they saved just enough money to hit the road. But trouble hit when they ran out of money on the New Jersey Turnpike. At the toll booth, they didn't have the $4.50 to pass through. The toll worker took one look at their packed van and said, "I believe you because if you had money, you would have rented a U-Haul." When they finally got to New York, things didn't go well. They went to the YMCA, hoping to work in exchange for a place to stay. When they came back outside, they found all their music equipment had been stolen. With no money and no instruments, they didn't know what to do. Feeling desperate, they ended up at a famous spot in Harlem called Small's Paradise. A man there said he could help them get their equipment back for $50. The problem? They didn't have it. That man turned out to be Benny Ashburn, who later became their manager. Benny lent them the $50 and even got them an audition at Smalls. At the audition, they wowed the audience by dancing and playing music at the same time. People hadn't seen anything like it. Thanks to Benny, they started to get noticed. They even got to perform alongside Kool and the Gang, which was a big deal. Benny Ashburn became the manager of the Commodores, and his job was to help the group become more successful. One of the first people he met after taking on this role was Suzanne DePass. Suzanne was someone Benny had known for a long time, and she was also a trusted figure in the music business. Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records, had hired Suzanne to help find new talent for the label. Berry trusted Suzanne because she had already proven she was good at what she did. One of Suzanne's first big projects at Motown was working with a young group called the Jackson 5. The group had just appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, and their popularity was quickly growing.
Oh, baby, give me one more chance.
To make them even more famous, the Jackson 5 needed an opening act for their tour. Suzanne thought that the Commodores would be perfect for the job. They were known for their great shows and energetic performances. The Commodores got the chance to tour with the Jackson 5 for 2 years. This was a big break for them. Touring with a famous group helped them get more attention and show off their talents to a bigger audience. After the tour, Berry Gordy was impressed by their performances, so he decided to sign the Commodores to Motown Records. This marked the beginning of their successful music career. One of the Commodores' first big hits was an instrumental song called Machine Gun. It became very popular at sports events, and it was even featured in movies like Boogie Nights and Looking for Mr. Goodbar. The song made it to #1, 22 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Another song, I Feel Sanctified, was a funky track that inspired other bands like Wild Cherry, who later recorded the famous song Play That Funky Music. The Commodores even made an appearance in the 1978 film Thank God It's Friday, where they performed their song Too Hot to Trot.
Now you're too hot to drop now, baby. Now you're too hot to stop.
Other songs like Brick House and Easy were also featured in the movie.
Easy like Sunday morning.
But as successful as they were, the group decided to take a break from recording and touring. During this time, Lionel Richie, who was the lead singer, decided to try working on a solo album.
You said that you didn't want to leave the Commodores. Is that true?
No, I had no intent.
I just always assumed that you were like, okay, I'm Lionel Richie now. I'm ready to go and go on my own.
Motown encouraged him to do it, and his solo album became a huge hit. Because of this success, Lionel Richie decided to leave the Commodores and pursue a solo career.
You know what solo means?
Yeah.
Solo means you get another band. I already had a band.
Right.
The problem that happened with the Commodores was it was so difficult from a press point of view. In other words, everyone would write. It was very painful. I've been through this with the guys when one guy gets a hit record and no one else gets the hit record.
Right.
I know what that feels like.
Not everyone in the Commodores was happy about Lionel's decision. William King, one of the original members, talked about how hurt he felt in an interview in 1985. He said it wasn't just that Lionel Richie left, it was how he left. Richie kept telling the group that he would return after working on different projects. First, he said he'd come back after working with Kenny Rogers, then after working with Diana Ross, and finally after his own solo album. But each time Richie didn't return, and the group had to wait. Promoters were also hesitant to book the Commodores for shows because they didn't want to hire them without Richie. King used the example of the Beatles to explain how important Richie was to the group. He said, "Would they book the Beatles without Paul McCartney?" To the Commodores, Richie was their McCartney, important part of their sound and success. But instead of telling the group directly that he was leaving for good, Richie kept them in uncertainty, which made things harder for them. Richie, on the other hand, has explained in interviews that he never meant to leave the group hanging. He thought he would go back to the Commodores, but as he worked on his solo projects, he discovered he really enjoyed being on his own. He liked the freedom and the ability to make his own decisions. However, from the Commodores' point of view, the waiting and not knowing what would happen next was hard to handle.
So you would like to get the Commodores together again?
Oh, gosh, yes.
So
For
why
30
not?
years, I've been trying to do
Come on,
this.
then.
When Richie left the Commodores, the band thought they would be okay without him. They had been making music together for years, and everyone believed that the band's sound came from all of them working together. But the public saw Richie as the star. People thought he had written, arranged, and produced all of their biggest hits. While Richie did write many of the songs, the other band members played important roles too. But when Richie left, the band realized something difficult. Many of their fans were only interested in the Commodores if Richie was part of it. Thomas McClary, a member of the Commodores, shared his thoughts about the problems within the band. He said that jealousy can be a dangerous feeling. McClary praised Lionel Richie, saying, "Lionel is very talented. He has a great voice and is a wonderful writer." Even though some band members may not want to admit it, McClary believes that Richie is truly talented and deserves recognition. McClary also talked about William King, another member of the band. He said that King was often seen as a problem. McClary felt that King was the least talented of the group and that he had been a big reason for the band's struggles. He also mentioned that Walter Orange, another band member, listens too much to King, which makes things harder. When McClary was asked if he would like to have a reunion with the band, he said, "Yes, I would love it." He explained that he had been trying for nearly 30 years to make it happen. He remembered a time in 2008 when Lionel Richie invited him and Ronald LaPred to perform together in New Zealand. Fans were excited to see them on stage again.
In fact, Lionel Richie and Ronald LaPred and I actually performed in New Zealand recently, and we performed in New Orleans, and 65,000 people showed up. So there's an appetite for the reunion, obviously.
Lionel invited the band to perform at the Essence Music Festival in New Orleans. The band tried to get the other members to join, but the bitterness was still too strong. Some members hadn't spoken to Richie in 40 years. McClary felt frustrated, saying, "Come on, you've forgotten what you're mad about." It's clear that McClary hopes one day they can all come together and reunite as a band again.
We just barely made it in because we didn't have enough money to get to the toll booth.
It was that bad.
It was that bad.
After Lionel Richie left the group, he was replaced by Skylar Jett as a new co-lead singer. Another of the founding members, Thomas McClary, decided to leave the group. He wanted to start a solo career and create a gospel music company. In a recent interview, he shared his thoughts on why he and Lionel Richie left. McClary explained that things were changing in the band. He noticed that some of the members were not as excited about the music anymore. They got distracted by other things in their lives. This made him feel like he needed to help keep the band strong. McClary also mentioned a sad moment when Benny Ashburn, their longtime manager and a big part of the band, passed away. His death affected everyone. It was tough because McClary felt like they were winning as a band, but some members weren't playing their best. He compared it to a sports team. Even if you're not the one scoring the points, you still want the team to win. After leaving the Commodores, McClary and Lionel Richie worked on projects with other artists. They wrote songs together for Kenny Rogers and Diana Ross, including a song for the famous movie Endless Love. McClary wanted to remind everyone that they were doing great, even if not everyone felt the same way. After McClary left, he was replaced by guitarist and vocalist Sheldon Reynolds. Reynolds brought a new energy to the group, but soon after, Sheldon left to join the famous band Earth, Wind and Fire. This left the Commodores without a guitarist, so William "Wok" King, a trumpeter, decided to take over on guitar during their live shows. A few years later, another important member, keyboardist Milan Williams, left the band. Million's departure marked the end of the Commodores' original lineup. Milan Williams had a scary experience before he left the Commodores. One day, he was flying a single-engine plane when something went wrong. The plane started to have problems, and Milan had to make an emergency landing. He chose to land on a busy freeway in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a very dangerous situation, but luckily Milan and the band's press agent got out of the plane safely. The plane caught fire and was destroyed, but both men were unharmed. It could have been much worse, but they were lucky to escape. Later on, Milan decided to leave the Commodores. This was a big deal because he refused to perform in South Africa during the apartheid era. Apartheid was a time when black and white people were treated unfairly and kept separate. Milan believed this was wrong, so he stood up for what he thought was right. But this decision caused tension within the band. His departure marked the end of the Commodores' original lineup, the group that had been very successful. After Milan left, the band's music changed. They moved away from the funky sound that had made them famous, and it was a tough time as the group tried to find their new direction without him. Unfortunately, Milan's story took a sad turn. After leaving the Commodores, he was diagnosed with leukemia, a type of cancer. He fought hard against the disease, but after 2 years of struggle, he passed away in 2006. His death was a big loss for the band and their fans. Many people who loved the Commodores were heartbroken. Milan was more than just a great musician. He was an important part of the group's history. The Commodores also faced other challenges. Ronald LaPred, the bassist, left the band and moved to New Zealand. He also had his own struggles after leaving. The band had already lost Milan, and the changes made it harder for them to keep their original spirit. Losing key members like Milan and Ronald made it tough for the Commodores to stay the same, and they had to adjust to a new chapter in their journey. The Commodores, like many bands, they have faced problems with money and the use of their name. These issues became even bigger when the original members of the band went in different directions, making it hard to come back together without tension. The trouble started in 2013 when Thomas McClary began using the name The Commodores for his own band. Meanwhile, William King and Walter Orange, two other original members, kept performing as The Commodores, but with different musicians. This created confusion among fans and led to legal problems. In 2018, the case went to court in Florida, where a judge made a decision in favor of King and Orange. The court said they had the right to use the name The Commodores because they were still performing as the band. The court also explained two key reasons for this decision. First, the judge said that the members who kept performing as The Commodores had what is called common law trademark rights to the name. This means they had the legal right to use the name because they were still actively performing together as the group. Second, the court looked at the agreements the band made over the years. These agreements showed that the name belonged to all the members of the band, but if someone left, they couldn't use the name alone. Because of this, the court ruled that King and Orange, the members still performing together, had the rights to the name. McClary, while still recognized as an original member, could not use the name to promote his own band. He wasn't allowed to call his band The Commodores featuring Thomas McClary or the 2014 Commodores because it could confuse fans into thinking it was the original group. Also in 1984, they added a new member, James Dean J.D. Nicholas, as a co-lead singer. He joined Walter Clyde Orange, the drummer. However, after some time without big hits, the band finally had success again in 1985. They released their last album with Motown Records, Night Shift. The song Night Shift became a huge hit, reaching #1, third in the US and winning them a Grammy. The song was a tribute to two famous singers, Marvin Gaye and Jackie Wilson, who passed away the year before. Even though the new music helped the band get attention, not all fans liked it. Many of their old fans missed the old funky sound and didn't like the pop style. The Commodores' change wasn't just about them trying something new. The music world was also changing. In the 80s and 90s, new technology like digital music started to take over. People were listening to music in different ways, and record labels wanted bands like the Commodores to make music that would sell more records. To do this, the band had to change their style to fit what was popular at the time. This made things hard for older bands. The Commodores had to figure out how to keep their old fans, while also trying to get new ones. It was tough to stay relevant in a changing world. Some fans felt left behind, while others liked the new sound. The band had to balance both sides as they moved forward in a fast-changing music industry. The Commodores decided to re-record one of their biggest songs, Night Shift, as a tribute to Michael Jackson after he passed away in 2009. This decision came after a touching moment while they were on tour in Europe. On June 25, 2009, the band was performing at Wembley Arena in London when they heard the shocking news about Michael Jackson's death. At first, they thought it was just a rumor, but once they confirmed it, they were all deeply saddened. The very next night in Birmingham during their concert, lead singer J.D. Nicholas added Michael Jackson's name into the lyrics of Night Shift to honor him. From that moment on, the Commodores began mentioning Michael Jackson and other famous R&B stars who had passed away. This moment of respect inspired the band to re-record Night Shift with new lyrics as a tribute to Michael on the first anniversary of his death. The Commodores have always been influenced by great artists like Santana, Jimi Hendrix, Albert King, James Taylor, and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. While these artists had different styles, they all had one thing in common: a soulful, raw sound. The Commodores took inspiration from these musicians and worked to mix their different styles into something new and exciting. They wanted their music to be honest, real, and connect with people on a deep level. Their efforts paid off in a big way. The Commodores have sold over 70 million albums around the world. That's an amazing achievement. Their music has touched the hearts of fans from all over, and they are known for their smooth melodies and songs that make people want to sing along. The Commodores have also received a lot of respect for their work. They have been inducted into the Alabama Music Hall of Fame and the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. They have also been nominated for 9 Grammy Awards, which is a huge honor in the music world. They won 1 Grammy, adding to their many achievements. Even though many years have passed, the Commodores are still active in music today. As of 2020, the band included 3 main members: Walter Clyde Orange, J.D. Nicholas, and William Wack King. They are still performing with a 5-piece band called the Mean Machine, traveling around the world to entertain both old and new fans.